Okay, today's presentation will be approximately 45 minutes with time left after for questions. The lines will be muted until the end of the presentation, at which time uh, listeners are free to ask questions. There's a chat function on Uber Conference on the right side of the screen. You can type in any questions you have, and I will relate those questions to the speakers at the end of the presentation. Our sponsor today is GLSA. For those non-members who may be dropping in on the call today, GLSA, or Group Legal Services Association, is an affiliate of the American Bar Association, a professional membership organization representing the legal services plan industry and provider attorneys. And joining GLSA is just a good way for solos and small firms to increase their business. Check it out at glsaonline.org. All right, my name is Tom Martin, and I'll be moderating this morning's panel discussion, which is entitled Legal Plans, International Perspectives. I'm very excited to have our panelists with us today, Riyad Bacchus of Sykes Assistants in Canada, Anjay Fedork of Riyadh in Western Europe, Steve Ginsburg of Unifor Legal Services Plan in Canada, and Pat Monks of Monks Law in Houston. So each of them brings a different perspective to the table today, and so we're looking forward to what they have to say. If each of the panelists, if you could tell us a little bit about who you work for, who you are, and what you do. And Riyad, if you would go first, followed by Anjay, Steve, then Pat. Love to hear more about you, Riyad.
Oh, perfect. So to reiterate, my name's Riyad Bacchus, and I'm employed by Sykes Assistants here in London, Ontario, here in Canada. Sykes Assistants is actually owned by Sykes Enterprises out of Tampa, Florida, which is traded on the NASDAQ. With respect to Sykes Assistants here in Canada, we are Canada's largest provider of telehealth nursing assistance. We employ 300 nurses to deliver health lines for the different provinces here. We're also Canada's largest provider of roadside assistance if you break down and need a tow truck. And of course, we're Canada's largest provider of legal assistance or legal call center services. And that's the division I manage. So I've been here for about 17 years, and that's the history of Riyadh at Sykes.
All right, Anjay.
All right, my name is Antje Fedork, bit difficult, and I'm the head of the International Association of Legal Protection Insurance. We are based here in Brussels, Belgium, and we choose this location because here are all the institutions that are active in the European Union. So we have short ways and direct access. So Riyadh is the only body worldwide representing the unique interests of legal protection insurers and service providers in this field. And we have presently 55 members that come from Europe, Canada, South Africa, and Japan. In the capacity as a representative or voice of legal protection insurance, Riyadh defends the potential of legal protection insurance as an easy, affordable, and high quality solution for access to justice and the law. And in this capacity, we position ourselves, we do direct lobbying, and one of our very important activities is organizing an annual congress where we discuss topical issues that are touching our industry and address questions that need to be answered. So I have been here now for 11 years, and I'm really excited and thank you very much to be part of this panel discussion.
Well, thank you for being here. Steve.
My name is Steve Ginsburg, and I run the Unifor Legal Services Plan, which is a union-based plan. We have 83,000 members. We started in 1985, and when we started, there was a lawsuit trying to prevent us from starting. Lawyers didn't like the idea of legal plans back then, and because we had a closed panel, or we were proposing a closed panel, that led to the lawsuit. So now how we deliver services ever since we started in 1985 and settled the lawsuit is we have a panel of provider lawyers, about 1,000 provider lawyers. We also have staff offices where we deliver the service ourselves. And we also reimburse people who go to their own lawyer who's not a part of the panel, not one of our staff lawyers, according to our fee schedule. We have 6 staff offices in various locations. We came about as a result, Unifor is a merged union. It used to be the Canadian Auto Workers Union, and so you can see our plan started back when, just after the UAW plan started in the States, and it's very similar in terms of the comprehensive benefits that we have.
All right. How about you, Pat?
Yeah, I have attended. I was past president of GLSA and been on the board for 6 years. I have been on the international. I don't want to confuse Riyadh with Riyadh, because Riyadh is that's a little confusing. Mr. Bacchus, and then there's the organization. I first came across him, was introduced about 4 years ago, and I attended my first Congress in Belgium, and I was actually a presenter, which I had an excellent time. I enjoyed myself, and I've learned a lot about the international aspects of the insurer. Yeah, Texas was its own country at one time, so I guess that's why I'm talking. But we joined the union in 1845, and it's kind of worked out for us, so I think we'll remain. I do have a different perspective. I do have a cousin, Paul Monks, who is a trainer for AXA Judica in Ireland, and he is very familiar with insurance and specialty insurance. And so I do have a family member that actually sells and trains people to sell legal expense insurance as opposed to legal plans. My information is going to come from just my personal experience and my interviews with other people with the International Insurers Organization, and that's why I'm on the call. And I will be at the Congress in Ireland, in Dublin, in October. I already planned on it because I enjoy that. That's it.
Right.
All right, great. Well, again, the topic today is legal plans international perspective. So we're going to learn a little bit about how legal plans work on the world stage, how things are similar and how they're different. To that end, I'm going to ask some questions, and our panelists feel free to offer your answers in the following order, if you will. Riyadh, then Antje, then Steve, and Pat. We'll then check for listener questions afterwards and wrap up. So the first question I have is, what kind of legal plan products are available where you are? And is it insurance, group legal, prepaid, or legal expense insurance? And what are some of the differences there?
So in terms of, in terms of Canada, you have some union prepaid plans operating, such as that operated by Steve, and there are others as well. There's quite a bit of simple legal access plans that only offer limited service, summary legal advice over the phone, discounted local lawyer referrals, that type of thing. So that's very generally, on a high level, the legal landscape in Canada up until recently, when we're starting to see some interesting new trends, such as some monoline legal expense insurance companies coming over from the UK, which is really an interesting new change in development. So that's really interesting and bodes well for the industry.
Okay. Well, it's difficult to say what products are available where I am, since our members come from basically all over. However, our members, they are basically legal protection insurers, and actually the monoline insurance company that Riyadh Riot referred to is one of our members. And so what we see where our members are is that legal protection insurance is really has a longer tradition than prepaid legal expenses or prepaid legal service plans. However, we see in many countries as the requirements and the need of consumers is changing, that new products emerge and enter the market. And actually, quite a few of law firms, they have looked into offering a kind of prepaid services, and you see that really emerging in many markets. And I leave it at this for now. If you think I should add anything, please let me know.
No, that's good. We're gonna get into it a little bit more later.
Okay, well,
how about you, Steve?
I can add about Canada to what Riyadh said. Riyadh basically said there's union prepaid plans and access plans. There are other plans, especially in Quebec. There's insurance plan, and he mentioned an insurance plan that's come into Canada. There are insurance plans in Canada, but a lot of them are just add-ons to an insurance policy. So, or add-ons to mainly to an insurance policy. So, in the insurance policy, there's some legal component, and that is administered not necessarily by the insurance company. That's the main insurance company on the policy. Could be administered by somebody else. If it's just an access component, it could be administered by Riyadh. So insurance is getting bigger in Canada. DAS, which came into Canada 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't know if it's in the States yet. I know they were thinking of going into the States. They did some research. I don't know if they're in there. They're really the oldest European legal insurance company, and DAS stands for La Défense Automobile et Sportive, and they were founded in France in 1917. And the way they came about is they covered race car drivers who had accidents on the tracks, and that gave rise to a lot of legal disputes involving liability insurers. And ironically, legal insurance was conceived as insurance against insurers. And some of the DAS insurance policies are kind of like that. They find, although I haven't read one in a long time, but they find gaps in insurance coverage, and so they have legal expense insurance to protect against those gaps. But DAS has also done a very good job, I think, in marketing and having other types of plans. So they'll market a business plan to a small business. They'll market an access plan, and and they'll market individual plans. And we also have platform plans in Canada, what I call platform plans. LegalZoom I don't think is in Canada yet, nor is Avo or Rocket Lawyer, but there are platform plans, other platform plans in Canada where it's like an access plan. That they may give you some information, some documents. They'll hook you up with a lawyer on their platform, may or may not give a discount. So it's very, very similar, Canada, to what's in the U.S.
So a platform plan is one where you pay a monthly fee for certain limited services, and it's not insurance.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes. Yeah. What I call a platform plan is a plan that really has a platform on the web, and just like Uber, most of the business is conducted on the platform. It's like its own little community where lawyers and and consumers of law, lawyers and potential clients hook up, so to speak.
Okay.
That's what I would call a platform plan.
And Pat, what kind of products are available in?
Well, let me talk from my perspective on what of course, I'm in the United States, so I'm going to talk to you from my perspective on the changes and the differences that I've seen in Europe and in South Africa, because I have been attending the congresses and I have seen this. And from my perspective, I can see the differences real quickly. One of the things different a little bit in the development of the European law as opposed to the U.S. law, the concept of a contingency fee. The United States, we've always had it. It's kind of a new thing now in Europe. They have it in Ireland, a little bit in England, Holland, where there's a little bit of contingency fee. So now let's think in terms of the insurance product. Legal expense insurance, as Steve said, fills the gaps. In the United States, we have add-on products for insurance, PIP, uninsured motorist coverage, that sort of thing. But if you are seeking compensation for an injury sustained in an auto accident, you'd probably hire a lawyer, and they would file a lawsuit, and they would receive their compensation by a contingency fee agreement, okay? Until recently, that didn't exist in Europe. If you needed to sue somebody to seek compensation for your injuries, you would simply call your insurance carrier, who carried the legal expense insurance as an additional rider on your auto policy, and they would file the lawsuit and get the compensation for you. There's a big difference that I've seen. Okay,
and Pat,
Europe's changing.
Pat, do you know?
Yeah.
Pat, do you know? Is that because of some kind of ethics rule or something that prevented it in Europe?
It's the way the law developed. It's just the way their law developed. You see what I mean? And our law developed in a little bit different way. They had ethic problems with it. Now I guess they're seeing a light because of the expense, or it's just changed. It wasn't 5-6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, England had that 15% contingency fee, and they never had that before. And so it's kind of a new thing. And I don't know why. But it's just kind of a new thing that they developed, and they learned from us. They don't call it a contingency fee; it's an incentive fee in Holland, and I think that changed the way the law, and it has to do with the expenses. I think that's what it is. Now, I know a little bit about South Africa's experience. South Africa has a product. There's a company down there, and they pretty much operate like an access plan, but it's sold as an add-on to car insurance. And what happened in South Africa, the sales went to the roof after apartheid fell. When apartheid fell, you had all this group of people that had all these new rights, and they wanted to assert the new rights, and that's what spurred the sale of it. And then the cost of the plans are not that much. They're about 36 Rand, which is approximately $8-9. And so that's how they developed their plan, is an add-on to car insurance. Now, Steve said earlier, a lot of these are sold as an add-on feature, okay? It's also, in England, sold as an add-on feature to homeowners insurance. Now, the difference between the United States and Europe is many of these plans actually can own the law firm that does all of the work, and they can do it in-house. And
Pat, may I correct you? This is not true. It's only in the UK that insurers are allowed to own law firms.
Right. Now, what I was going to say is Anjay can tell you the difference. Some of those countries are reimbursement, and I don't know. I know in England they use a law firm in Bristol. It represents. That's the only country I know that does that. But anyway, that's just my take. That's just from my observation. But Anjay can tell you every country is different on how they do. Some countries are reimbursement. But she can tell you the difference, and she can tell you also the percentage of people that participate in these legal expense insurance.
Okay, and with England, it might be that because of the new ABS companies, alternative business companies, that they're allowing, that they allow that kind of fusion between private companies and law
Well,
firms.
it's ownership and management really that's allowed through external parties.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Pat kind of jumped us ahead, which is great. So the next question I had was, how is it done elsewhere? And when I say it, I mean how are legal plans and insurance done differently elsewhere, like Australia, South Africa is a couple of examples, and just any information you have about that. Um, Riyadh, do you have some input on that from your
I'm
experience?
I'm not too knowledgeable about plans outside of Canada, so I'm not going to add too much there.
Okay, Antje?
Okay, well, Pat has referred, and actually Steve has referred to some differences. And one difference definitely is how the legal expenses insurance or the prepaid plans are being sold. As an add-on, that's, for example, the UK market or the French market. And then you have other markets where legal expenses insurance is really bought as a standalone, all covering family insurance. And that means that any issue that raises within the insured group of people is being covered. And by covered, you have to see the different jurisdictions and the different ways how it works. You have legal protection insurance that provides legal services in-house. That means they contact the adverse party, they negotiate a settlement. While in other jurisdictions, the activity of the legal protection insurance is basically limited to just covering and reimbursing the costs of settling a claim. So I would say that these are really the most obvious differences, and that's what distinguishes the different types of products substantially.
One of the things I heard earlier was that some types of legal insurance are offered as an add-on. It sounds like a common thing elsewhere, and when I say elsewhere, I mean outside the United States. And I'm kind of wondering why when I sign up for my car insurance or renew it, that they're not asking me, hey, you want to protect yourself in case of an accident. What if you have to seek compensation for injuries, or what if something happens, or what if anything, for peace of mind, would you like to have some kind of legal insurance plan to cover that as another type of insurance that I'm offered? And I'm just curious to hear what you all think about that. Like, why is that different? Why is that not happening in the US, where it's a common add-on with other types of insurance that they try to proposition you for legal insurance?
Well, it is a common add-on for in employee assistance programs, right? So,
Yeah.
the basic access legal plan. If you have an employee assistance plan, I'm talking about the United States now. If you have an employee assistance plan as part of benefits you have at your workplace, there's probably a legal services component in there, which is an add-on to the EAP. You wouldn't know as an employee. You may not know as an employee, unless you looked at the brochure of your EAP, that you even have a legal, an access plan.
Which
But
is, of course, a big problem.
Yeah, it is a problem, but it's there. So, that's that. I think so. But to answer your question more generally, it all has to do with marketing and broker systems and all of that as to how legal plans, get to the consumer.
Well, let's think about it. Let me address the question. Why isn't it an add-on to insurance as an insurance product?
Okay, well, in Canada, I can tell you that you have to be an insurance company to have an add-on to an insurance policy.
Right.
So, and to be an insurance company in Canada, there's a bunch of hoops, as there is in the States, and it's probably state by state. So I think one of the problems is, insurance regulations. It's my guess.
Well, I would say there's very few of the legal plans in the United States are insurance companies. Our is one of them. Most of them are legal plans governed. In the state of Texas, we have something called the Licensing Regulation Agency, which is what legal plans are governed under. So it specifically says in legal plans this is not insurance. And because of that, it makes it very difficult to add on to be sold as an insurance product on an insurance policy, just like Steve said. Same problem.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
The target is to do, it's sold as a benefit, as group benefits. Yeah.
All right.
Well, you must see also that the add-on legal protection product is not only an add-on to an insurance contract. It can also be an add-on to a credit card, for example, or bank account or whatever. So it's not necessarily linked to another insurance product. The best known is, of course, the add-on to a third-party liability motor insurance.
And that's my point, really. That's my point, is that it seems like there's just so many more access points to add on legal services than in the United States.
But that gets back to the marketing and the broker network, because insurance brokers are all over the place. So here in Canada, DAS is in Canada. They'll hook on to insurance agents, insurance brokers, and get their plan into various things. But to broker into all the branches of a bank and try to get the bank to sell this as part of your bank account as an add-on, it's more difficult.
And it sounds like it's related to Pat's point, trying to distribute through a bank in Canada. There'd be all sorts of regulatory issues about whether the bank employee needs to be registered as an insurance agent and all that complication associated with regulation, which differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Right.
Exactly, yes. That's the big issue when you look at the European market, that the jurisdictions function so differently that you cannot so easily sell a product cross-border from one country into another, because you have to adjust to the regulation in the respective market.
Yeah.
All right. The next question I have for our panel is, how does culture inform plan design around the world? So does anyone have any examples of this? And let me give you an example so you know what I mean. So, for example, traffic issues. In the United States, there's a strong anti-drunk driving campaign versus some other countries where attitudes about safe driving, they might be a little more lax about that. Are there any examples of cultural differences in how they affect legal plan design that the panelists are aware of?
I can give you one example, but it's old, and my knowledge of it is old, and maybe Anjay can help me out. But in Sweden, I think that legal expense insurance, it was first of all, it's included in household policies. I think it still is anyway. My information's old. But also in Sweden, they had very widespread legal aid system, so that it wasn't just the very, very poor in Sweden that had legal aid. So Swedes were used to having legal aid, and at a high level. And so I think it's a culture that's used to being protected. And so when LEI was introduced in Sweden, I think there was a big uptake. because it was cultural in terms of that. Yeah, they wanted that. They wanted to be protected. Yeah. Anjay can maybe help me on that.
Well, you can actually refer in this respect to most Scandinavian countries. And as you very rightly said, the culture there is that people feel that it is part of their legitimate rights to be protected when it comes to defending your rights. So most household insurances or whatever, they would have included the legal protection part. And it is, I talked to somebody, for example, from the Danish market, from the Danish Insurance Association, and it is almost impossible to separate the product like household insurance from the legal protection part. And the feeling of or the general feeling of the people is really that they don't want to pay extra for it, so they more or less do not because it is just covered. But another example I would like to give is the Dutch market. When you look at the Dutch market, you have a very liberal approach to regulating the legal professions. So actually, almost anybody up to an amount of almost $20,000 can represent another person in court. So there is no monopoly for lawyers to be representing a party in court. So due to this really liberal regulation, you have legal protection insurance providing about 90% of the services for their insured people. So you have really to see how different aspects of the activities of the legal protection are regarded in one country to see how the product is designed.
Okay. I guess one last question I have is regarding the popularity of legal plans elsewhere in the world. If anyone has information about, what percentage of people use them, and what type of usage is there elsewhere in the world?
I guess this question is a bit directed towards me. So when we look at the figures we have, you have, for example, the Swiss market, where 58% of the population is covered by legal protection. And you have then, for example, the UK, where you can say about 22% of the people is covered. In Germany, it's about 40% of the people who are covered. But you must also see what kind of cover does that include. The UK, they are more or less a complete add-on market, which means that not all life situations would be covered by legal protection insurance, but very specific life situations, like linked to a motor car accident or linked to your house insurance would be covered by legal protection insurance. So I would say the most or the market that's most covered is really the Swiss market, and then followed by Dutch market, and then even with about 50% covered the Austrian market. So this is,
wow. So there's a much greater percentage of the population that uses legal insurance elsewhere.
Yeah. Do you have
ahead.
any figures for the US? Because my
Well, I have old figures. In 2004, I conducted a survey on behalf of GLSA. It was called API at that time. And we published the results, and I'm looking at it right now. The data, and so I did a lot of calling of a lot of GLSA members, plan administrators, and then got leads from that and from that. But I'm not saying it's the most comprehensive survey that you could possibly have, because it was basically a one-person survey. But we ended up with 5,000 legal plans with 19.4 million enrollees, covering 45 million Americans. So that would be about 15% at the time. Now, a lot of those people probably didn't know they had legal services, legal plan coverage. And 90% of them who had coverage were covered by a plan sponsored by an employer or a trade union or both. In Canada, the figures were kind of similar. It was about 5.5 million people covered out of a population of about, at that time, about 30 million. So maybe it was a little higher than 15%. So those are old figures. I'm going to say that if 15% of Americans were covered in 2004, probably at least 20% or more are covered now. How many of them know they have coverage? Because of this, phenomenon of access plans being buried in employee assistance plans and things like that, I'm not sure. But I'm sure, I'm confident that over the last 12 years, 13 years, the numbers grown just from what I hear at GLSA conferences.
Actually, what I've heard is that in the US, meanwhile, almost up to 30% are covered, but this might not be.
Well, there you go, double from what I
yeah.
That's possible.
Well, that sounds like a great uptick, and it's going in the right direction. It sounds like that we have a lot to learn from our partners internationally, that there's a lot of interesting ways to add on legal services internationally that aren't yet available here, and that the expectations and accessibility of legal plans is quite different. So I want to thank you all for the really tremendous amount of really insightful and useful information about legal plans internationally. We don't have any posted questions, so I just want to thank everyone who called in for attending our teleconference today, which is Legal Plans, International Perspectives, and thank each of our panelists, Riyadh, Ansha, Steve, and Pat. Thank you all for your wonderful insight today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas.
Also, just want to thank GLSA for hosting and being our sponsor. Remember, joining GLSA is just a good way for solos to increase their business. Check us out at glsaonline.org. I'll see you all next month.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.